most of the time I'm being hired to dramatically scale a company. We're looking at 50 to 100% or more growth per year. When I get involved, and honestly, one of the first questions I talk to leadership, I'll sit down with the CEO, with the founder, if they're running the company, and we have a kind of frank, honest conversation of, do they really want to do this?
Welcome to the Fueling Deals Podcast, the podcast that teaches how to accelerate your business growth through all types of deals. It's time to fuel up, so buckle in with your host, Corey Kupfer.
There are only two ways to grow your business: organically through sales, marketing, providing great service, etc., and inorganically through deals. Too many companies focus only on the first way, organic growth. Welcome to the podcast, which will help accelerate your business growth inorganically. My guests are a huge variety of deal makers and experts on all types of deals who have personal experience that will help you grow, get clear, learn best practices, and avoid mistakes. We discuss everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My guest today is Bruce Eckfeldt. Bruce is an entrepreneur, former Inc. 500 CEO, consultant, coach, author, and speaker on organizational development and performance management. And I'm super excited to have Bruce on the show. Bruce and I know each other very well through Entrepreneurs Organization, and I get to have his wisdom basically on a monthly basis at our forum meeting. So I'm super excited to have our listeners get to hear his wisdom as well. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Corey. It's a pleasure to be here. It's fun. I'm excited as well to chat about this topic.
Oh, that's great. So listen, before we get into what you're doing now and all the things that you've accomplished, I want to take you back. Growing up, for you, that was Minnesota, right? So growing up in Minnesota, when you were a little kid, what did you want to be when you grow up? Because I had a feeling it probably wasn't a business coach.
Yeah, well, my joke was I would tell my mother I wanted to be an artist and then marry a rich woman. But ultimately, it was an architect. I ultimately became an architect, and it kind of tied into that art background, and that's how I started my career. And I made several pivots between when I trained as an architect to what I do now, but it's been a fun journey. It's been a lot of interesting experiences and interesting opportunities that I've had, and I'm very appreciative of it.
So what would you, however you define it, what would you consider your first real business?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go really back, I sold bubble gum in sixth grade, and they shut me down after there was too much bubble gum on the bottom of the desks. But I think the first real kind of business venture that I had early, sort of post college, was the company that I founded in 2002. Working in software development. And I think like many stories, it was kind of an accident. I was in a company, I wasn't super happy. I had an opportunity to work with an organization that wanted to build out a new software package. They were interested in hiring me to do it. I had a friend. We had to put an LLC together to kind of start the project, and that project led to another one, which led to another one, and before we knew it, we had a company up and running. So it was a little, I don't know about a surprise, but it was a little accidental that we got the business kind of up and running as quickly as we did. But it's where I kind of really got into the CEO seat and the entrepreneurial mode.
And was that the company that you eventually ended up taking to Inc. 500, or was that a previous company?
Yeah, it was. So that was the company we started 2002, 2003, scaled it actually quite quickly, ended up on the Inc. 500 list in 2009, and we had, I think, 5 consecutive years on the Inc. 5000. So we went through a series of pretty significant years of growth between about 2008 and 2011, 2012.
So I'm sure that a lot of that was organic growth of various types, through getting more business and sales and marketing. But were there any types of deals that you did during that time to help grow the company?
Yeah, we did. We opened a Boston office. We were based here in New York for much of that period, but we had a big client in Boston, and we decided that we were going to do some work with some other companies there. So we decided to open a Boston office, and we kind of did a little bit of an Acqui-Hire situation where we had some senior folks that had some traction, early stage traction. There was no capital kind of exchange. We came in and basically made them senior folks inside the company as part of that. And it was, what we realized was, going out and trying to put our own team together and kind of build it from the ground up ourselves was just not going to be feasible. It was going to distract us too much from the New York business. And so, finding some specific senior folks that could really help us get that up and running faster was key for us. It's certainly something that I find it's, you can do it. You can go into a new geography and you can, find the people, find the clients, but having a foothold just accelerates that whole process and reduces the risk.
So I love that phrase, Acqui-Hire, and I want to explain it to our listeners because I find that so many. This is a way that a lot of companies really do grow, and it is what I would consider a deal, and it's often positioned out to the marketplace as some sort of acquisition, when it's really not from a legal point of view, because you're not acquiring assets, you're not acquiring equity. Really, what you're doing is you're hiring somebody, you're cutting a deal with them to say, hey, come in, we're going to take over, your business. Let's say, they may have clients, they may have business, they may have office space, et cetera. But really, the structure behind it is they're not getting equity, they're not getting cash up front. You're hiring them and paying them, and you may have some sort of incentive compensation built in there. But the point is that, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, your experience with it. But the thing for our listeners that's important is, this is a great example of a type of deal that many companies use to grow, organically, that does not take capital, any upfront money, and where you aren't necessarily even giving away equity.
Yeah. And I find it's particularly common or works particularly well in service-based businesses or businesses that have a pretty strong service component to them, which basically means that, you've got people who are key to the delivery of the value. They have particular relationships or skill sets or certifications. And when you're dealing with people like that, you're not dealing with kind of hard assets that you're acquiring. It's squishy, right? I mean, the people are not, things that you can kind of buy and sell that easily, or at least based on my current understanding of the law. But sort of these acqui-hires are this approach of finding individuals or small teams, groups that have capabilities, have experience working together. Oftentimes, that's a really powerful kind of asset, a team that has performed together, has worked together, and they have experience and have developed kind of higher level capabilities. And to some extent, clients, relationships, sometimes we're looking at kind of brands, or we're looking at, some kind of brand recognition, awareness. Usually it's very tied into the individuals. So there's some kind of thought leadership component to it. But yeah, they can be great ways to build out the business. Like I said, we did it in our case because we had some demand. We had clients that needed services. We needed people on the ground that we know could perform. We didn't want to take the time or take the risk of having to build our own teams. So bringing in people that actually had experience working together. Basically, cutting a deal. They were effectively employees with incentive programs that had to do with if they were bringing in work, if they were bringing in clients that had revenue potential, working out a deal for a cut of that realized potential, and then performance on existing contracts. To the extent that we had business that they were going to execute on, providing good. Incentives, monetary incentives to help them realize the value that we were hoping to bring to the table. And for them, it was a great way to scale up their business and have, a lot more kind of access to people. Scaling service-based businesses is not easy. So it's a nice way to kind of bootstrap that.
Yeah, and I'm great you mentioned that because, I was going to say that from your company's point of view, or the quote unquote acquirer's point of view, I think it may be easy to see the reasons you may do it. You mentioned geographical expansion opportunities, and you may be bringing in certain expertise that you don't have. Just the ability to scale quicker. It's a lot easier sometimes to get those kind of personnel than to find them on a hiring basis. You mentioned that, they already work together. If it's multiple people, they already work together as a team. So you have you don't have to rebuild that teamwork, et cetera. But from the point of view of the of the other side of the people that you're now going to employ, I guess in some cases you might have some challenges, right? They're entrepreneurs, they have their own company, and now you're asking them to come in and join your company, where inevitably, listen, no matter what we say, they're going to lose some level of control and freedom, even though you can give them some protections around that. Can you talk a little bit more about not only what you've seen in that particular deal, but I know the clients that you coach now as a business coach, these kind of things come up. So, what do you see are the reasons and the way you can approach or convince companies like this, or even if you're, if one of our listeners on the other side and they're considering joining up with a bigger firm, like what are the reasons for them to do that?
So, I'll talk about my experience, and then I can talk about some of the clients that I've worked with, that I coach, and some of the deals and what we look at when we're looking at either acquisitions or being acquired. I think the thing I learned in that process was there's kind of the skill fit, is the functional, what are the capabilities you need, what are the the services that you're trying to provide, and what kind of skills and experiences and capabilities. And there's this kind of fit around the ability to do the work. And then there's this other axis around kind of culture and values. It's a harder one to assess, and it's a harder one to kind of evaluate pre-deal. But oftentimes it's the one that has a much bigger impact in terms of the ultimate success of the deal itself. Typically we can kind of make the functional stuff work pretty well, in terms of being able to get the work done. But the cultural fit, how you make decisions, how you prioritize, particularly in high growth situations, when you're growing, you're dealing with lots of decisions, and you're having to change policies and structure and how you do things and how you operate. And in those decisions is sort of the realization, the manifestation of your values. And if you don't have good value alignment, you're going to have drama and you're going to have conflict. And I would say we did okay. It wasn't perfect. We definitely had some things that we disagreed on about how things should operate, and some of it was more kind of personal. Some of it was just sort of the difference between the environment, so the difference between kind of New York and Boston, and kind of the culture, the working cultures in these between the locations. I think that's where I kind of learned the importance of evaluating that. And honestly, the way to evaluate that, you have to spend some time. It's not something you can do through a survey. It's not something you can do looking at someone's resume. Spending time working through issues, working together on projects, is where we kind of found we found out if there was that kind of cultural alignment. So it's really been important to me as we work through, as a coach now, working with companies they're dealing with either acquiring companies or becoming acquired. It is really kind of sitting down and evaluating that aspect. In terms of, how do you actually do that? Like I said, spending time together, asking about how they've done previous deals. One of the things I love to do is talk to people that have been acquired previously. So if we're doing a situation where they're being acquired by somebody, talk to other companies they've acquired in the last 2 years, talk with the people that have been acquired, find out what it was like, learn about their culture before and after. If we're doing the acquiring, typically what I recommend is some kind of project, doing some kind of project together to kind of kick the tires for both sides.
Date before you get married.
Yeah, basically. Once you get married, things change too. It's not perfect, but typically we can map out pretty well the bigger issues that might be there that either might give us pause in terms of doing the deal, or there are going to be notes around things we know we need to manage and work through during the first 6-12 months of post deal in terms of the actual integration and merger. Because it's important to know what those things are going to be, and if you know what they're going to be, you can have a plan and you can work through it, and you can reduce some of the risk, because it can be challenging.
Yeah, I find these kind of deals very, very interesting because I've seen them. I'd love you to comment on it. I've seen them more. So first of all, in down economies, it's a great way to do deals because often entrepreneurs who are out there who think they're doing okay, and frankly, in a good economy covers up a lot of problems and ills that you may not realize. And then when things get tougher, you find out your inefficiencies and where you're not strong, and it comes home. So people are definitely open to those kind of deals from the the joining side, from the being Acqui-Hired side, to use your phrase. But even in good economies, I find that there are a certain number of people who go out there and listen. We know this. You and I have been entrepreneurs for a lot of years, where we spent a lot of time with a lot of entrepreneur folks from EO and other places. And there are some people who sort of figure out, hey, when you become an entrepreneur, you lose the ability to focus on what you were great at, what you loved, and your particular craft, whatever that was. Now you got to run a business, you got to deal with people, and you got to deal with cash flow, and you got to whatever. And there's a certain percentage of people who just decide that they don't want to do all that stuff. They want to go back to what whatever it is. So any thoughts on that, and what you've seen in the companies you've coached, and and any thoughts in general?
Yeah. So most of the time I'm being hired to dramatically scale a company. We're looking at 50 to 100% or more growth per year. When I get involved, and honestly, one of the first questions I talk to leadership, I'll sit down with the CEO, with the founder, if they're running the company, and we have a kind of frank, honest conversation of, do they really want to do this? Because growing the business is more than just about more revenue at the top of the balance sheet. I mean, we're looking at really changing how the organization operates, and it's a change in what the leadership needs to do. And like you said, quite often I've seen too many cases where the entrepreneur starts to grow the business and they stop having fun and they stop enjoying it. And best case scenario is they realize it and they either stop growing and they shrink it back to where they're having fun, or they look to monetize the value of the company and get back to starting something new. Worst case scenario is they get into a self-sabotage mode. They end up kind of destroying the value they've created because they don't really want to grow, but they're not aware enough around it to take a more productive option around it. And it's an honest conversation where we just look at what does it mean to grow, and what is the leadership change that a CEO needs to go through. Yes, you're now operating a company through other people and building out a leadership team, and that is a different kind of process and a different kind of work than if you're a craftsman or a master of a particular trade or a particular whether it's technology or design or you will do less of the actual work. And if that's not something that you want, then scaling can be a really difficult challenge, I think, personally for the leader, for the CEO. So it's something I think you really need to, have some hard conversation around and think about before you really embark on the scaling process, because it will impact you.
It makes me think about, I'm a fan of Les McEwen's book, Predictable Success. And, and he talks about, after your startup phase where you have some challenges, whatever, if you have some level of success, you get to this phase that he calls fun. And it's it's a phase where, things are starting to get, the money's coming in, you sort of rocking, and, the visionary is happy, and they have somebody that he calls an operator. I won't get into his whole framework, but it's worth checking out for our listeners. But, and you can operate in fun forever. But it's not scalable. And then, once you scale and you try to get to what he calls predictable success, where you have a scaled business with systems and processes and, and the right team in place, et cetera, but the phase he calls in between fun and predictable success, he calls whitewater. And there's a reason for that, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's that we use that model a lot. And I think that, Les talks about this, but I see it in company again and again, is you move into whitewater unless you have a plan to get through whitewater quickly and into that predictable success. It's painful, and you will quickly want to get out of there. And if you don't have a plan for going forward, you will go backward as quick as possible, because it's not a fun place to be, and not having a plan and then not really knowing that's what you're doing. I think that's a lot of it. I think people end up in whitewater not even realizing that is what happened, and that's where some of the more kind of unfortunate stories happen, because they it ends up eating away at the value. It ends up eating away at the culture of the company. And if they're lucky, they can kind of come back to fun. Worst case scenarios is they actually skip fun and they won't go all the way back to the early struggle. They have to rebuild the business.
That's right. And it's interesting because, we're talking about deals, which is really where, we focus, in this podcast. Deals can be a great way to help to scale, but also deals can throw you into whitewater if you don't do it right. Yeah. You're not prepared. I mean, integrating technology, integrating culture, integrating people, integrating new clients, integrating different systems. So, I'd love to hear, in your code, when you work with clients, how do you prepare these clients? They're looking to grow in general, but certainly through deals. How do you prepare them so that their journey through whitewater? Because I don't believe you can skip whitewater, but their journey through whitewater is much much smoother, and they get to predictable success much more quickly.
Yeah, I would say it's really speed. It's like you're always going to go through water. You just want to go through it as fast as possible. I have a phrase that I love. When you find yourself in hell, or when you find yourself going through hell, keep going. Right? It's like the last thing you want to do is get stuck there. So. Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the things that I've done with clients that are thinking about being acquired is we have a conversation. We sit down and figure out what money do they want in hand. So I work through a worksheet with them, and we figure out what is the amount of cash they're going to get on signing in hand, walking away from the table that they would be completely happy with, meaning that if they didn't get a single penny more, if they didn't get their earnout, if the bonuses, performance bonuses and things like that never happened, what would they still be happy with? Because I want to get them to a point where they are unattached to the future of the deal. Because once they do the deal, you have basically lost control. You're no longer really an entrepreneur. Even if you're taking some kind of voting shares or something like that, if you're giving up majority control, you now are kind of under the you've handed over your future to somebody else or to another group of people who are going to make decisions around it. So in order to make that deal successful, what I find is I want to get that founder, that CEO, into a position where they are, from a cash point of view, happy. Because then they can deal with things. What I find is hard, or where it gets really stressful, and also ultimately I think people end up making difficult and sometimes not so good decisions, is when they are relying upon the future earnout of the deal to kind of make them happy about the actual transaction, and it just puts a huge amount of stress for the entrepreneur now in this earnout period to try to perform. And I've seen entrepreneurs do a deal and then be miserable for 1, 2, 3 years as I try to do their earnout, but they have to, because they still need the money. They still feel like they need the money to be able to have a successful transaction. And I think getting to that, if you can figure out that number, it really allows you to make the transaction in a very kind of neutral, positive way, and not worry about, what's going to happen afterwards, because you just don't know at that point.
That's great. And then from the side of the acquiring company, what do they need to know on how to prepare, on how to make a deal successful or integrate a deal properly, and make sure it works out from their point of view?
Yeah, so it's almost kind of the reverse, is figuring out what is that entrepreneur. What do they want to do? What drives them? What deal is going to make them happy so they can fully participate post-transaction? The other thing, as I say, is like you need to have a plan. If you're going to be acquiring a company that is led by the founder, someone who started the company, you kind of need to have a plan for that person not being there long term or even midterm. I'd say you can count on them being there for 6 to 12 months, but you kind of need to have a plan if they don't want to stay on long term, because not every entrepreneur will successfully make that transition. So, as an acquirer, I think that's just a a risk scenario that I want to make sure they have a plan for. It doesn't need to be the perfect plan, but I think they need to have a plan for how they're going to handle it. In terms of evaluating a deal, I certainly think looking at the cultural aspect of the company. So as I mentioned before, it's easy to kind of look at the skills and the products or the services or the assets and how it fits into the strategic plan, but really understanding how that company, how the leadership and the company how they've made decisions, what they've prioritized. That is going to be a huge impact to how how quickly they integrate from a day-to-day point of view into things. I think every deal is different, and I think it's is understanding really what the success factors for a particular transaction are going to be, and then looking at some of those variables and what's going to impact that, and making sure you evaluate it. I think a lot of times it's easy to look at it on paper, but when you're dealing with people, understanding how those people are going to interact is going to be important.
Oh, that's great, Bruce. So any last thoughts or words before we we're going to wrap up on a couple of final questions. But before that, any last thoughts, a piece of advice you think that our listeners need to know about either being on either side of deals or types of deals that you see out there that are helping companies grow?
Yeah, I think that there's a deal for every situation. Like as much as they're kind of these standard things, I've seen really, really creative stuff done to deal with unique situations, unique desires, people's plans, and I think really being willing and able to come to the table with flexibility and creativity can get a lot of things done that I may not have thought could be done initially, but as people kind of work out and really get true to what they want to get out of it, both business-wise and personally, I think you're gonna see deals that are structured in a way that's going to be successful for both parties. And don't get too attached, quite honestly. I think that's the other thing is I see a lot of deals, start and then not happen, and people get very frustrated and very kind of dejected from it. And I think you go into every transaction, with as much detachment of any particular outcome as possible, and be willing to kind of explore without it being kind of having to have happen, because I think that allows those things to play out the way they need to play out.
Absolutely. Listen, that's the second pillar of my authentic negotiating framework, clarity, detachment, and equilibrium. Yeah. Detachment is such a great thing to have in business. Yeah. Hey, so Bruce, listen, I know you've been so successful in the past, and you work with some great clients now to help them grow and be successful. So, if people want to find out more about you, where do they contact you? And also, you also have a couple of great podcasts, so let people know about those as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you want to know more about me, it's pretty simple. It's Eckfeldt.com. That's ECK, F as in Frank, ELDT.com. That's my website. It talks a little bit about the work that I do with clients and coaching. And then, yes, as you mentioned, I've got two podcasts, one called Scaling Up Services, which is all about service-based businesses. And the other one is Thinking Outside the Bud. So I work with several cannabis companies, fascinating market with a lot of deals going on right now. And that's all about innovation in the cannabis space. So feel free to check out either one of those. There's some great interviews, people talking about transactions, talking about what it takes to successfully scale and grow companies. So I encourage people to check them out.
Oh, that's great. You should definitely check those out, folks. So final question, Bruce, and you can answer this in whichever way you'd like, in terms of your business or, as a coach, you see this in other businesses or both. So how do you make sure you, for your business or your client's business, that the deals you do and the way that they scale and grow stay authentic to who you, or in your client's case, they are? Yeah,
I think it's a good one. I think the one thing that I always encourage people to do is sit with it for a little while. I think people get very kind of wrapped up in the kind of the excitement or the froth of the deal. And I always say, it's like taking an evening to, doing something else. Let your subconscious kind of mull things over a little bit and pay attention to the emotions. Pay attention to what's happening for you emotionally, because that's a good guide typically around how something is fitting with your sort of bigger set of values and your bigger picture. And if your gut is telling you something, I say pay attention. It may not be clear exactly what it is, but there's something there you need to kind of dig into. I just find that it's such a good indicator on if it's a right thing to continue with or not.
That's great, Bruce. Thank you so much for being on the show, my friend.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah, this was a pleasure.
And thank you, Fueling Deals listeners, for tuning in. It's time to refuel. So until next week, Corey Kupfer signing out. And remember, there's only one difference between companies that grow inorganically and those who don't. And it's unrelated to size, amount of capital, or any other factor, other than that the owners and executives of companies that do deals make a decision to do deals, and then they take action. See everybody next week.
Thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to leave Fueling Deals a rating and review on iTunes and Google. Check out all our episodes at fuelingdeals.com to find out more resources to accelerate your business growth.